Okay. Welcome to Cafe Con Veritas. It's just me and my boy Manny here, and we're having some coffee, some Cafe Bustelo. You will see. Oh, I'm gonna move the cameraman. He's not gonna like that. That's our tripod for the day, boy. Hey, do we need that mic?
No, we don't. It's gonna get. It does pretty good.
All right, well, that's good.
Yeah,
that's good. Better than my iPhone. Okay, so let me just double check, make sure I'm still in the frame. That would be kind of good. We are good to go.
All right, cool.
All right, so today we're going to discuss this video that we talked about. I guess if we end up posting this, we'll put it in the description. The video was called, I wish we had it up on the thing. Where's my phone at? What's the video called?
It's right there. It's in your...
Oh,
the one that I sent you. Okay.
Yeah. It's a shorter video.
Yeah, shorter video. The video is by, it's a gentleman named BitChute.
No, BitChute is the...
Or Black Pigeon. Or Felix Rex.
Black Pigeon Speaks. Okay, Felix Rex. This is a video by some dude on BitChute, and he's just talking about how feelings don't care about your facts, which is the opposite of what Ben Shapiro goes by. But he kind of talks about how that facts don't care about your feelings is maybe not as applicable or relatable to our current society, our culture.
Mm-hmm.
So we're just going to kind of discuss that.
And we'll put the video in the show notes for you guys to actually take a look at.
Yeah, I would definitely watch it. I think that it's pretty interesting.
The reason why we wanted to talk about, or I wanted to talk about this, is because we were sort of discussing earlier in the week, like how do we address a culture that doesn't believe in facts? Like how do we even engage? How do we change minds if a Marxist and socialist cultural revolution is occurring and you can't even come up with the basic simple facts to contradict? So I'll give an example, right? It's like if I go up to somebody who's a Marxist or a socialist or democratic socialist, you guys are all the same bit, right? You're cut from the same cloth. And they say, no, socialism is right, Marxism is good. And I bring up, for example, the collectivization in the 20th century where Stalin pretty much killed off and starved to death 5 million Ukrainians, which they called them kulaks, right? And they're like the typical response will be like, well, no, that's not real Marxist, that's not real socialism. So it's like there's a barrier in between how to have that conversation. And Ben Shapiro is really huge on this facts don't care about your feelings, which I love Ben Shapiro. I'm a fan of him. I really do like him. But it's like, Ben, like Felix Rex brought up, he's like, yeah, facts don't care about your feelings, but we don't live in that world anymore.
Yeah.
Like we don't live in a society or culture where feelings where facts care about your feelings. Now it's like, that's a video there.
Yeah, keep going. I'm just gonna scroll down it.
So it's like when we live in a world that feelings don't care about your facts, essentially the point is moot. Like Shapiro's point is moot. And so it's really I don't really know where to go from there essentially, and even how to begin the conversation.
Well, I think the fact is that relativism, the technical stuff, we haven't mastered that yet. So whatever, episode 1. But no, I think that the problem is that we're living in a post-relativistic society, like a society where relativism has infected it. So feelings matter more than facts because nobody understands truth.
Right.
And because people don't understand truth and people don't want to live according to anything that disturbs their sense of basically pleasure or what they're feeling, like how they feel, and that's how they feel good, right? I think that's why we are where we are today. So you can't have discussions with people about facts because really at the end of the day it's like that doesn't really matter to me. It doesn't make me feel good.
Right.
And that's how you get transgenderism, that's how you get homosexuality, that's how you get all these different things, because it's like I don't care if psychology, look at the APA in the 70s, they took homosexuality out of their textbook for political reasons, but right. It's like, I don't really care about how these facts, what you're telling me that's not my reality, it's not my experience. And really, so now what we're in a culture that says, well, rather than heal the brokenness, rather than heal, because ultimately truth is good and truth allows for goodness and healing and peace. Anything that's opposite of that is not going to be beneficial to the human being, to the human soul. So in a world where truth doesn't matter anymore, essentially true peace is not attainable anymore, and neither is true healing. So people go, well, I don't like that answer that you gave me, so instead of listening to the truth, which will ultimately help me, I'm just going to continue on my own way to search out, which really is, that literally is the life of the follower of God. It's like, if you don't follow God, who is the truth, you're going to find yourself suffering in the desert for 40 years like the Israelites are.
And suffering unnecessarily.
Because you don't want to accept what is true and what is good and what is beautiful and what is right and what is... And so that's kind of where we're at. So it's like, yes, you can, obviously, a lot of people have seen the Ben Shapiro videos where he's kind of dialoguing with students, and they're saying like, well, what do you think about this, and what do you think about transgenders, and what do you think about abortion? And he gives them the facts, and he does do it in a very matter-of-fact way, and it's not usually very digestible for people.
Right.
They're usually like, like, I don't like that, but I know it's true, but you didn't deliver it to me in a way that's palatable. So do those people walk away changing their mind? Probably not. And that's partially because we need to better embody Christ himself, who was the truth, who came to people, encountered them, met them where they're at. That's why I like the show The Chosen. Small plug for that, dude.
Awesome.
Great show.
Awesome show.
That guy who plays Jesus, he does a great job. Mind the camera? The guy who plays Jesus is...
just checking the timer because it only goes 27 minutes per, and I have to just keep on recycling it. So that's fine. It's no big deal.
Limited tech. The guy who plays Jesus does a great job of encountering everyone in the show, and I always feel like, dang, that's probably exactly how Jesus did it.
Right.
And he just like encounters them lovingly and just speaks truth to them. It's funny, last night in youth group we were reading from St. Paul's thing, and the way I read it the first time, we were doing Lectio Divina type stuff, the first time I read it, it's easy to kind of read St. Paul's words almost like he's condemning people.
Right.
But then if you change your tone of voice and you read it not in a condemning tone of voice, but in a different kind of more like matter of fact, but still gentle.
Taking responsibility,
yeah.
I would say.
It's like, whoa, how did St. Paul, how did he intend for this to be read? And of course the readers, the Corinthians or the Romans, would have personally known him. So it's hard for us in 2021 to be like reading that stuff and be like, you shouldn't be doing this, versus he probably, you guys shouldn't really be doing this, And they'd be like, oh, we know how Paul was, right? Anyway, it's a small digression, but the reality is it's definitely difficult to have that dialogue with a culture that doesn't care about facts. They only care about feelings. So it's hard to even get it. It's hard to even steer the boat of the culture, because it's like, guys, here's the truth. We need to listen to this. And people are like, no, it's not true. And a lot of the time people, I think, maybe this is right, maybe this is wrong, I think a lot of the time people don't want to hear the truth because it's not convenient, because you are not an authority figure, because we live in a world where we really give credence to people who have positions of authority. And that's like a whole other discussion. And it's like, but that just goes to show you that people don't know how to think for themselves anymore. Because it's like, well, you're not really an expert, so you can't tell me. It's like, well, I read the literature on it, and I think I understood it pretty well. I have a pretty decent understanding of the English lexicon.
Mm-hmm. You don't need a PhD to be able to read a study.
But it's exactly. But it's like, well, you're not a doctor, or you're not a scientist, or whatever. It's like, whatever. So.
Which is fine. It's just that the problem is that we have doctors who are conservative. We do have doctors who are standing up and who are saying certain things about, whether it's COVID or whether it's, any other diseases. And so, but they're sort of like ostracized. And I'm sort of getting at too is like people with PhDs who are philosophers and theologians and who are making moral arguments for, what what the Christian faith and what, pointing to that truth that you were sort of, talking about before, and they're just disregarded. And the problem is because they want a cookie Christ. They want, they want a God who doesn't, or not even a God, but because we don't have to take it too, make it too spiritual, you know what I mean? But they want a philosophy, or they want a way of life that allows them to do whatever they want to do. And what happens is with that mentality is that you never progress, you never take on responsibility, you never move forward in your life, and you then fall into this pit hole of just believing either whatever you want to believe about the culture or your own personal decisions, and then you rationalize them. Then you live in a culture that tells you that rationalism, like your own sense of rationalism, is good enough, right? So it's like, oh, I'm a pretty smart person, I have a master's degree or a PhD or whatever the case may be, and then what they don't realize is that they're just believing a narrative as opposed to the truth.
Yeah. No, it's true, and it's interesting. I don't know, man. I mean, that's just kind of how human beings are, is we don't learn from the past. But when you look throughout history, I don't feel like that. That doesn't make me feel good, facts. But anyway, no, when you look throughout history, every one of these civilizations has eventually imploded once they've thrown truth out the window. And I was thinking about that earlier today. I think it was after I listened to that video, actually. And it was talking about how, everyone, well, not everyone, a lot of people are like, oh man, America's going to have a civil war. America's going to, just be completely end because of the differences in ideologies. And it's like, that's possible. But I think this guy's opinion is right. Similar to Rome, similar to Greece, similar to any ancient culture, any country, Soviet Union, what you name it, any of them that threw truth out the window, it's a slow erosion. It's a slow erosion. It's not just like it totally implodes on itself. It's actually kind of like a slow implosion. So it's like slowly things are collapsing. Kind of like a dilapidated house. It's like it's slowly falling in on itself.
Right.
And I think that probably is how it's going to go in America. But I also think that that's also like a more hopeful view of what the future could be, because it's like, oh, okay, well, if it's not going to just totally fall in on itself really quickly, then maybe there's an opportunity there to get some foundation beams and some supporting beams and rebuild what is slowly falling in on itself. But then it comes down to us. It comes down to the people who make up the civilization, the families, the ones who maybe are red pilled, or the ones who actually see the truth and know Jesus and know what is right to share and help others become informed. And that's a difficult thing too. And so then it's like, are we going to have the courage? Are we going to have the desire and not just be like spiritually lazy? Or
I'm more thinking about the fact that in the decline, there's going to be a lot of loss. In that decline, people
more like cutting out the dead wood.
Definitely like I wouldn't say cutting, more like burning off the dead wood.
Well, cutting and unburning, right? Isn't that what Jesus says, like burning the chaff or whatever?
So it's like, and that's where I'm a little bit more concerned, because the probability that people are going to deny themselves, like carry their cross, and it doesn't look good, in other words. And a lot of people are going to be lost in that sense, and and I'm trying, at this point, like we had discussed off camera, is like, there is only so much that you can do, but to do nothing that can't happen. You know what I mean? And this is why we need strong vocations, we need strong families, we need people who are rooted in Christ, we need single people who are rooted in Christ and who are living a morally good life. And then that's so, it's like, why is that important? And perhaps maybe that's the answer. Maybe that's the answer to the feelings don't care about your fact situation. Is by living out the moral life. I think that's how we change the minds. That's how we're going to end up, and that's a Nietzschean critique as well. Nietzsche had made the declaration that the only real Christian was Christ. And he couldn't really of course I think that it was perhaps maybe a poor understanding of Christianity, but then again, Nietzsche was a very smart man. He excuse me, he had a criticism that was like, if the Christian faith, for example, is what it claims to be, this transformative power, why aren't there more people that are transformed? And perhaps maybe that is the answer. We need to be Christ. We need to take on and be root ourselves in Christ, to become Christ crucified, and then live that moral life out, so that people can be like, what's up with this family? They have 8 kids and they're super amazing and they're loving and they, and it's not a non-judgmental. This is not like don't judge me kind of situation. No, like there's truth and charity is what that is. And standing firm in that, and unwavering in the moral, and living the moral life. Because I don't know about you, I don't see any way out of it.
No, I agree. I think that living it out is a huge part of it. But it's like that fake St. Francis quote, right? Preach the gospel and all. Preach the gospel always, but when necessary, use words. I think that St. Francis of CcV did not say that. He's my patron saint.
I was about to say Trent Horn's going to come back at us.
No, Trent Horn, I got you, man. I agree. I've had to tell many people. They don't like hearing that. They're like, I've believed this my whole life. I'm like, anyway, but no, I think living it out is important. I think speaking the truth is still important, and being unashamed.
So don't you think that's a form of speaking the truth?
It is. And this goes back to what I've been thinking a lot about, and I said it, is the way that guy in The Chosen represents Christ. That's really what Nietzsche meant. Yeah. If every Christian, and this is what Nietzsche didn't understand, is that human beings, unlike Christ, are not free without sin, right? They're not sinless.
Right.
They're not perfect. They're not, 100% human and 100% divine. So they don't have the benefit of being like not only sinless, not only perfect, but having the pure knowledge and goodness and love that Christ obviously had. We human beings have our brokenness. We've got our wounds. We've got our bad habits. We have our sin. We've got original sin, and then we got all the sins that we've committed. And then
not original sin. That was taken off in baptism.
Right, it's taken off in baptism.
Anyway.
But that did affect us, though, unlike Christ. And then you've got what was I saying? Oh, then you've got the impact of sin, right? Even if you've been forgiven, you still have... So human beings are way more complex. Now, yes, if Nietzsche is right, if everybody could be like Jesus was, and I think very well embodied in the show The Chosen, heck yeah, man. So I think about that all the time. Like, dang, I did not... Because that show really does a good job of embodying like who Jesus was and what it means to live like Jesus, at least in the few episodes that they've had. And I hope it continues because it's really good. But like, if every Christian could just be like, that's how I should approach my interactions with other people, whether it's just through the thing is we know it. We know the fruits of the Spirit. We know all these different things and how we should encounter people, but we don't do it. But anyway, the point is if we could all act like that, then yeah, I think that's what living out Christianity really would be like, is if we could actually, through the perfect conformity of the will of Jesus, have every interaction be not one of selfishness, like I do all the time. People have been calling me out recently. Like, it's easy for me to get defensive if someone disagrees with me or whatever. So instead of being like, huh, it's really interesting that you said that, I'll be like, oh, dude, what are you talking about? You have no idea what you're talking about. This is the reality. And it's like, and yeah, you laugh because everybody knows
Let
it.
me learn you some
Well,
knowledge.
let me tell you something. Okay, you're wrong, but that's not how Jesus would have done it, obviously. So like, but and I'm trying to conform myself to Christ, but
Right.
that's just a bad habit or whatever that I've learned. My own selfishness, my own defensiveness. Like I don't have the humility, I guess.
But that's where people, I think that...
We're psychoanalyzing me on the podcast. Anyway.
I think that it's good because it's like that's what people face, and you're taking the attitude, and I take the attitude. It's like, okay, that's what we have to work on. That's what we have to kind of like focus on to help conform ourselves to Christ. But people see that difficulty of not being able to do that, and so what happens? And they're just like, all right, I'm just gonna go live my own life and do whatever it is. Truth is relative anyway, so it's like it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't go. They don't embrace the cross, in other words, and they don't allow themselves to let that conforming happen, but I definitely think that I agree that it's like if we can be like Christ and the chosen, we can meet people where they're at. That's where we're able to sort of like that's a reflection of the truth. We can reflect Christ, and people can be like, huh, maybe I should listen to this person because they're not that their life is better than mine, but it's like they seem to be progressing, they seem to be growing, they seem to be able to acknowledge their faults, right? Through our fault, through our most grievous faults. Like they're able to recognize their faults, but they embrace the necessity to change that. And so I think that as that process works, they recognize that that's truth, and then perhaps maybe that will be the saving grace to kind of restructure people's perspectives and say, well, maybe there are such things as facts. Maybe there are such things as that, because that's the thing is like, too, is like social media and our whole entire world is, and even the news media as well. We talked about this too, off camera. It's like once you're living your life through a lie. Like social media, all those people who you see on social media that look so happy and are traveling the world and are doing all this amazing stuff. Like the the happiest people are typically the most sad and the most depressed people. And they have all types of issues, and we all have issues, right? But it's more like, it's more of like embracing the reality and living your life in the reality, as opposed to this fake narrative that gets sort of promulgated in our culture and through our news media. And if you're a postmodernist, you can't believe in meta narratives, so you can dispense with that. Point being is that maybe that's the key. Maybe that's what needs to happen more. But I guess it's such a simple question, but it's also very complex. Like, how do you live that out? How do you live like Christ without saying, I'm gonna look at the chosen and I'm just gonna do what happens on the chosen?
Well, right, and I think that's a great point. And what did Jesus say? He said, when I leave, you're gonna do the same things that I did and greater things. So Jesus was only here for a temporary amount of time, his physical body, at least here on earth, not including the Eucharist.
I was about to say.
But, he wasn't able to be humanly present.
About a minute and a half left.
Okay. We'll take a quick break in a moment.
Yeah.
We got a hard stop for a commercial for Goya cookies. Don't sue us. Just a joke. But I think that the thing is that I don't even remember.
It's a complex dynamic to be able to live like Christ, and sort of how do we do that? Because it's very easy to say,
Well, part of it is dialogue with the culture about what truth is. So continue. Yes. Living like Christ is good, but also doing maybe what he didn't do. Not that he couldn't, but what he didn't have time to do or didn't make time to do or whatever, which is being unafraid to speak. We need to help the culture change the way it thinks. It's an ideological thing.
Sure.
And actually, we don't really know it because Jesus, I love in John's gospel when he says there are actually a ton of things that are not written in these books that Jesus did, but if we were to write them all, there would just be infinite books.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. I love that verse. Anyway, we'll take a hard break. We'll be back. Cafe Con Veritas. And we're back. Cafe Con Veritas. Official episode 1.
All right.
Not supported by Goya Cookies, but thoroughly enjoyed.
Or Cafe Bustelo from the beginning.
Or Cafe Bustelo.
Yeah.
Don't sue us.
But if you guys want to sponsor us, please get in contact with us.
That would be awesome. We do appreciate Goya. They're a terrific company. Amazing. Best Spanish company ever. We support them.
Yeah, we just like their.
We don't support AOC though.
We don't. No.
Anyway, I never had these palmeritas, so these are gonna. This is interesting. I like these Maria cookies, but the palmeritas, this is gonna be good. So anyway, we're back though, talking about still that video called "Feelings Don't Care About Your Facts." It's been a very interesting discussion.
Indeed.
And we're gonna continue it, and then we may go elsewhere as we have done for the most part. At the end of it, great hiccup. That keep interjecting with the hiccup. I like it. That's the worst though when you. Anyway, when I get the hiccups and it just goes on forever. Anyway, okay. So this was an interesting quote towards the end, and I actually did like it. I did agree with it, and it is foundational in terms of how you start to push against. I don't even want to say fight the culture war because I think that that's true, but even just before you fight, you have to kind of push against. So like you push against the culture. The guy says in the end of the video, he says, sanity is the currency, and sanity is the wealth of today that you need to preserve. First and foremost, you need to preserve sanity in yourself going into this winter of discontent. Your defiance comes in the form of rejecting this end cycle of depravity and insanity draped in the lies and the untruths. Sanity in an insane world is the greatest thing sanity in an insane world is the greatest thing that you can possess. Hone your skills, learn as much as you can. Don't let those infected by ignorance caused by a broken society influence you. That's a good way to kind of sum up what we just talked about, but I like the way that he puts it, that sanity is the currency and the wealth of today that we need to focus on preserving. So this kind of goes back off camera, and I think in the previous segment I had said, well, come on, don't you think that we need to be more informed and fight the culture war? And like, isn't there? And I don't always like people's response. There's only so much you can do. However, and I don't even know if the camera caught that when we hit start, but I agree with that statement, but I'm not satisfied by it, so I don't completely agree with it. But I mean, the reality is that yes, sanity, it starts with yourself. You have to make sure that you understand. Basically, what he's saying is you have to understand the truth. You have to be rooted in the truth, and you have to try to preserve that truth within your family first before you can even push against the culture. Which is the same thing Jordan Peterson talks about. Which is the same thing that we've heard, and it makes sense. I think it can be frustrating to someone who is angsty and eager to push back, but you ultimately do have to check yourself.
Yeah, clean your room first before you start
check yourself first.
I think that too, though. But I mean, to the reason why it doesn't satisfy you, I think, and maybe you can kind of like correct me as I'm sort of thinking this out loud. It doesn't. Are they good?
So good.
Okay. It doesn't. It isn't worth perhaps maybe focusing so much on yourself and on in your family, in your day-to-day walk, if you walk out your door and you're going to be martyred, kind of situation. You know what I mean? I guess we can make the argument. Well, that's how the Roman Empire was sort of converted. That the martyrs were sort of slain. But I think in this culture, I think it's going to be a little bit more difficult. It's going to be more of a former Soviet Union kind of mindset, where, like, in other words, you can raise a solid family and you can raise children and focus it on yourself and actually, focus on making yourself a saint and your family a saint and saints. But it's like like what does that account for if you walk out, if you have completely ignored the culture up to now, and then you leave your house and you stand up for your principles, and the first thing that happens is your head getting chopped off. You know what I mean? That was the easiest way for Stalin, for example, to stop sort of dissent and even people from taking over his position. He would just take them all out and their families and shoot them. So it's like, you see what I'm saying?
No, I totally agree, and this goes back to a conversation I had yesterday, which is, so how do we prevent that from happening? How do we? Because the whole thing is that Stalin got to that point where he had enough power, he could be like, all right, get Manny and Adam and their families, and we're not going to have them anymore.
Exactly. And your message, message is done.
Right, but the culture had already bowed down and said, lead me. They became sheep.
Right.
And that's what I have conversations about with other people, is I say, how do we need to help those, like, instead of saying, oh, there's only so much you can do, the culture's in a downward spiral, you just got to take care of yourself. I'm like, yeah, but also taking care of my community is part of taking care of myself. So
I think that's also a hyper individualism that ends up happening, and not just an individualism. I think maybe a hyper community-ism, I guess if you want to think of it, is like where, okay, well, I define my community, which is just in this box. No one else can come into this box. And I'm just going to focus on this specific box. The whole world can fall apart, but as long as my box is taken care of, that's great. The problem with that is that what happens when the world outside the box begins to destroy boxes? And this is what ended up happening in Stalin. He just rounded people up and shot them.
Yeah.
So it's like, your message is done. Your who you are is going to, because that's the thing, is that it's not about only getting shot, right, and getting killed. Like, your history, you as a person, gets wiped away, and we're seeing this now in our culture and in our news media and any other way. It's like, no, that really didn't happen.
Right.
You know what I mean? An issue with the COVID, we talked off camera about. Fauci, at first he said it didn't come from a lab, it came from natural causes, and now there's like a serious inquiry that's now going on to investigate. Even the President Biden is calling on the intelligence community to be like, you guys need to start investigating this, because the evidence now is overwhelming that this most likely came from a lab out in China. Yeah. So it's like, so it's not just, so I'm just bringing that up, to show it's like, it's not that you just get shot and your family gets shot and your extended family gets shot. It means, and it's like,
well, the truth dies with you.
It depends on what you mean by truth. It's like, if we're talking about Christ, the church has been here for 2,000 years, and ever since. The point being is that, yes, to a certain extent,
your potential to spread
the ability for you to actually change the culture and change the truth, or not change it, but spread the truth, dies with you.
Right.
And your name is stricken from the history books. What you have to say gets stricken from the history books in those specific cultures and those societies. So once you're gone, you're gone. Right. And so this is where that hyper communityism, where it's just, I'm just going to focus on me and my family, that's perfectly fine. And I highly encourage that. We need holy vocations to marriage, we need holy vocations to priesthood, we need holy vocations to religious life. We need those things, right? But it's like, go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. That Great Commission is not just given to the priests. It's just not given to the hierarchy. It's given to every single Christian that's out there. And so it isn't just this hyper, okay, there's only so much we can do. We should just ignore the culture, and because there's really nothing that we can do about it anyway. It's like, be careful. Because you're pretty much ignoring the building that's on fire, and you're thinking that it's not going to collapse on you just because you have a corner that seems that's not on fire yet.
Exactly.
In other words,
exactly. No, it's a good analogy. I know, I agree. Which is why I think before we get to the house is completely on fire and we're totally screwed, or like Stalin has the power, or dare I say, Biden or Harris have the power to do exactly that, just wipe people off, and the mainstream media acts like it never happens, which it's almost getting there. Cancel culture and censorship are doing that. We need to use this, and people are doing that in podcasts and stuff. We need to use the ability to have the freedom of speech while we still have it, to have these dialogues and try to reach people who are not within our box, or maybe not within, because I think the thing is like we might be within a box, like almost like a Russian doll. So it's like, well, conservative Catholics, and then there's, other Catholics who are maybe not as like on fire for their faith, or liberal Catholics, or like we're all sort of in this box of Catholicism. We need to have dialogues outside of our box, or at least allow our dialogue to reach those and let them know we want to have these dialogues, because ultimately it's not about you being liberal or us being conservative or vice versa. It's about the truth, and it's like, who has the truth right? Maybe there's some things that I don't have totally right that you understand better than me, and vice versa. Let's swap those ideas so that we can all live according to the truth and expand our box to be homogenous versus like, well, we're the best Catholics and you guys aren't. No, we need to try to. So that's my
us
thing.
And them kind of like
us and them mentality is exactly what the Marxists want,
right.
and that is the thing. That's how they divide us, and that's how they conquer. So while we have the ability to have the freedom of speech, to have these dialogues, to have these conversations, to really search out the truth, and because what it is, it's changing the ideology or the philosophy of the culture. How do you not everybody in the culture even sees truth as important, as truth as necessary, as truth as foundational to life itself.
They're the Pontius Pilate of the what is truth?
What is truth?
Asking Christ.
Then there are people who believe that truth is important, but there's relativism infected with that. So it's like, well, my truth's important, but yours isn't, or my understanding of the truth's important, and your understanding, which may be different from mine, and maybe it's a little deeper, maybe it's someone else's. Well, it's not really important, because I'm happy and content with where the truth has gotten me, where the truth, So we really need to agree. So really, the culture needs to agree on truth itself.
Yes. But I like what you said, though. That one part is like the truth has gotten me to this specific situation. I'm like, yeah, but the moment that the culture, for example, begins to prioritize. The moment the culture says, well, not only is the culture's truth more true, let's say, for example, but now it's so much more true that your truth doesn't even matter anymore, and therefore you need to be wiped out.
Right. That's
the problem, you see, and that's culture. Like you brought up, cancel culture. That's exactly what's happening. Right. So when that happens, this is why I like the building on fire kind of situation or analogy as well, is because it's like the building's on fire. The building has been on fire for a long time, and the problem is that we have gotten into this the apartment that our apartment that we're living in the building doesn't seem to be on fire. We smell smoke, we smell the smoke, but there's really no need to be concerned with that, because my part of the building isn't on fire, or
it's the east wing.
It's the east wing, and so exactly, and so that mentality needs to change, because if it doesn't, then our future looks very gulag-ish.
Yeah. That's the imploding house we were talking about, the dilapidating house. Wow, house and apartment, really good analogy, like it, dude. It's true. I think that
and sanity, to the point, like sanity is going to be the biggest currency, but how do you keep the sanity? By enveloping yourself in the truth, not in a truth, right, or your truth or my truth. There's your opinion, right? Yeah. And then there is which can be formed and shaped by the truth, but it doesn't become.
So then the real question is, or maybe the answer is, it's a question and an answer. How do we get people to think rightly? Or the answer, I guess, would be that we need people to think rightly.
I said no.
Think
We talk
according to
about
the
it.
truth.
We talk about it. We have these kind of conversations, and we bring it in. We bring people into the box. We have the dialogue. Come into our box. Come into our building that's for the most part on fire. That fires kind of like sprout out. But we do a pretty good job in keeping the fires under control, kind of situation. It's a controlled burn as opposed, because everyone's going to die. I mean, that's the reality of life, right? That's a fire that's constantly burning in our building. The clock is ticking, you know? So it's like, but it's a controlled fire. And we can have this dialogue and we can have this conversation. And we want you to be part of this, we want you to be not part of us. No, but it's like we want you to be part of this sanity, right? And it's so interesting. I was watching the videos, scrolling mindlessly on Instagram like an idiot because I gave up social media for Lent, but now it's so slowly I'm getting hooked onto which I'm just gonna end up probably just deleting everything off of my phone to stop that. But it sort of prompts me. And this person who's a drag queen, he's sitting there and he's like, I'm going to stop coming out to my straight friends. I'm going to now assume that everybody is gay and everyone has to come out to, like straight people now have to come out to me. And I'm like, first and foremost, I'm bringing that up because it's like, it's a complete change out of sanity into insanity. Like the natural law and the moral law are fixed, right? That doesn't change. So it's like, that's a fire that has gone out of control once we're to that point of insanity that we have to actually now have to be like, what? Right. Kind of situation. It's like, we need to now, well, we needed to do this a long time ago, but we need to begin to continue to have a dialogue and not be an us and them situation and actually have the conversation.
Right.
And that's how we're essentially going to change minds.
Right, and so part of how helping people live according to the truth is answering these existential questions like, what is the purpose of life? What is the meaning of life? What, like, people don't. That's the issue of relativism too, is that nothing has meaning. So when things lose their meaning or their purpose or the intention as to why they are even here, then everything else can fall by the wayside. So that's how you get to that point where you have someone who is psychologically confused and damaged or wounded, and they think that their wounds is their identity, homosexuality, transgenderism. They think that their wounds is their identity, and that they've identified themselves with their wounds, and they think that that's true.
Well, I bring it up as well because it's like you can.
I'm trying to figure out how to.
You can substitute anything out of that conversation, out of that sentence.
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna stop telling people that I'm. We can play devil's advocate and say I'm gonna stop telling people that I'm a Christian, and I'm gonna let people kind of like get into a society where it's like But the problem is that a Christian society is not an oppressive society. A Christian society actually calls you to conversion and calls you to carry your cross and embrace your cross and not identify with your wounds. Right. And understand that your wounds are there, that Christ wants to come into those wounds and he wants to change those wounds.
Right.
So, or heal those wounds.
Exactly, but it's kind of like, I'm trying to figure out a way to describe it. Hey, baby, she's on the camera. Hey, we're filming right now. You're on Cafe Con Veritas.
Yeah.
My wife.
Yeah.
Who's fighting the battle on the front line. I don't mean the COVID battle, but anyway. Is that even a thing? Anyway, point is...
But you can substitute. You can take that sentence, you can substitute anything. Any type of relativistic comment, any type of relativistic, just insert. You can take out those and plug
No, but it's like, what it's like, though? It's like the paralytic, right? The paralytic identifies himself by his wounds. That's a great episode of The Chosen, by the way, episode 4. So the paralytic has said... My wounds are my identity. I'm a paralytic, right? I'm a transgender person. I'm homosexual. I'm gay. I'm lesbian. Whatever. I'm bisexual.
Doesn't mean sexuality. Like,
right?
I'm a Marxist.
I'm a drag queen.
I'm
just going to assume that everyone else is a drag queen.
I'm a Democrat.
Right? Shut up. Right? I'm going to assume that everybody is a drag queen because I believe that this thing about me is true when it's not. So really what that person is doing is they're believing a lie. The paralytic believing the lie that he can't be healed, that he can't be forgiven, that he can't change, that he can't, right? So the reality is that you've got a culture that believes that a lot of people in the culture believe a lie, and they're just going to, and that's trying to figure out how to continue to say this, but ideology and philosophy are important because what is truth? What is true? Is the way that they're living rooted in truth? No, it's really rooted in brokenness. It's rooted in this identity that's kind of rooted in brokenness. But also on top of that, what is natural? What is true? So people don't believe that anymore. They don't think that there are things that are true based on the essence of what the thing is, and that I'm trying not to go too philosophical, but you know what I'm saying?
But, no, yeah, I do. I mean, I guess it's sort of like what the essential what is it? The essence of what Vatican II was supposed to do, and that was like open up the church and allow, like, we need to go out into the world and have those kind of dialogues. Obviously, we need to be careful with that, and unfortunately, that the world ended up influencing things in the church, and because everyone's broken, all Christians are broken, everyone we all make mistakes, but it's like the point being is that when we say we're going to open up and we're going to go out into the world, that's the whole entire point. It's not to identify with our wounds. It's not to identify with our crosses. It is to, or not our crosses, but more so identify with our wounds and our brokenness. It's about rooting ourselves in the truth and then being able to go out and tell people, like, look, like, this is the ultimate good, and the decisions that you're going to actually do and make rooted in this good is going to end up with the most good outcome. I guess you want to put it like that. So it's super important, and I don't think that we're gonna reach that sanity. I don't think that we're gonna reach that continue to like, the currency of sanity is in short supply because of that lack of truth. It's that lack of not only lack of rooting oneself in the truth, but then once you're rooted in that truth, saying, okay, now it's an us and them situation. I need to focus on this specific particular, like, no, you need to do more. Like, and we're called to do more. It's hard to do more.
Yeah.
I get it. It's hard to have these conversations. It's hard to hear the kind of words like, wounded and brokenness, and it's a challenge, especially if you identify with your wounds and your challenges and your brokenness, right? So I get it, but that's what the cross is. That's what Christ is calling us to.
Right.
Period. It's what we're supposed to do. And if we digress from that, or in any type of way or shape or form, it's like we're going to have the consequences that we have now, and that is feelings don't care about your facts.
Right.
That's a problem.
I think yeah, exactly. It is a problem. I think part of the issue is that it's lack of two things. It's lack of introduction to the truth and exposure to it. So I'm thinking of like muriatic acid, right? If the world is kind of like a big bottle of muriatic acid, totally bad for you and very toxic and corrosive, the more water that you introduce to that muriatic acid, the more truth is introduced to it, the more exposure the truth has in that muriatic acid, the more it gets diluted. At a certain point, right, and this is obviously it's almost like if it's a balloon, if it can continue to go, at a certain point, you're going to put enough water in that muriatic acid that's not going to have an effect. You could actually put your finger in it. Right. I'm not saying, nobody please try this at home, but like if you pour an Olympic swimming pool into, if you mix that with muriatic acid, the acid isn't going to affect you.
Right.
And that's the same idea with chlorine. Chlorine is like bleach, right? A bottle of chlorine, don't want to touch that, don't want to get it on your skin necessarily, don't want to drink it or whatever, don't want to go swimming in a whole pool of chlorine, but they put a certain amount in a pool to make it safe. So really what our culture needs to be cleansed, to be cleansed is to have the truth reintroduced,
lived out. And that's the thing. And the focus of those who and this is not like a Gnosticism, right? Where it's like we have, we're the small group that has the truth. No, it's like Christ is the truth, is the point of this conversation. But it's like, more so, it's like we can't just fixate on a box.
Yeah.
We can't just fixate just on ourselves. It's good to fixate on it's good to focus on ourselves at certain times, but always remember that change, that conforming to Christ, is to go out and be Christ to those, to be Christ in those people, and to introduce them to that, and bring them into the flock and bring them into the fold. That's the whole entire point. Like, we've missed the entire point in the last, I would say, 56 years since the sexual revolution.
Yeah, and I would say that, our society's become more toxic, like that muriatic acid or that chlorine, in that there's not enough exposure of the truth anymore. There's not enough water being introduced to that which is toxic. So
because
that's why
we're only focused on ourselves. We're focusing inwards, and we're trying. And this can also sometimes happen where we focus inwards, and it's a good focusing of inwards, right? We're trying to live our faith. We're trying to pray more. We're trying to, be conformed to Christ. But then we don't take the extra step.
Right.
You see, and that's the problem. And I think that's a good place to stop.
It is a good place to stop. The last thing I say, just to wrap it up, is we know where the source is of water, right? We just have to figure out a way to funnel and bring that in and introduce it to the muriatic.
But we're doing it.
We are, but I'm saying
not just we, but I'm saying like this is part of that.
All of those
process.
who know the source, which is Christ, need to
start your own podcast.
Start your own pack, maybe, but like, we need to figure out a better way, or have the courage or the strength, and not have the sloth or the laziness to reintroduce the truth to a culture of toxicity. We will be back next time on Cafe Con Veritas. Thanks for tuning in. We're very excited. Any final words?
Viva Cristo.
Viva Cristo Rey.
Yeah.
God bless. Thanks for tuning in. See you guys next time.